I earned my degree online at Arizona State University. I chose to get my degree at ASU because I knew that I'd get a quality education, they were recognized for excellence, and that I would be prepared for the workforce upon graduating. To be associated with ASU, both as a student and alum, it makes me extremely proud, and having experienced the program, I know now that I'm set up for success. Learn more at asuonline.asu.edu.
With so many options, why choose Arizona State University?
For me, the only online option was ASU because of the quality. Their faculty was really involved with their students and care about your personal journey. The dedication to my personal development from my professors, that's been extremely valuable to me.
Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online. That's a degree better. Explore more than 350 plus undergraduate, graduate, and certificate programs at asuonline.asu.edu.
I thank you very much for tuning into That Will Nevr Work podcast. Now, what if your dream life you've been waiting for isn't at the top of the corporate ladder, but on the other side of letting go? Today, we're going to talk to the electrifying Liz, who's going to join me and talk to all of us about how to break free, build smart, and to go independent, possibly on your own terms. We'll talk about it right after this.
Educate, empower, enable, impact. Thank you for tuning in to That Will Nevr Work, an award-winning podcast where we share inspiring information and personal experiences related to business and the entrepreneurial journey from those who are leaders in their respective field. Now, here's your host, author and business coach, Maurice.
I thank you very much again. So, of course, y'all can tune in to all of Liz's bios and everything else. Of course, you know that all her information will be in the show notes. So, all that aside, let's get to the nitty-gritty. So, is staying in your corporate job playing it safe, or is it playing it small? And could your life look like, what could it look like if you were to bet on yourself instead? So, Liz, let's start off with that. Are we playing it small?
Oh, well, I wouldn't necessarily say small, but perhaps you're playing it safe.
Okay.
But how safe is it anymore, really?
Right.
I mean, job security is a dream. It's not a given, and everybody knows that. So I never planned to be self-employed. I fell into it accidentally over 20 years ago. But that first year, I made more money, worked fewer hours, didn't have to deal with the big firm BS, and had more quality time with my kid. And I said, that's it. I'm never going back to a traditional job. So I am the champion of being self-employed. My favorite hashtag is solopreneur success. And so, and I recently published a book on succeeding as a solopreneur. So yes, I am very happy to talk about this topic and to encourage people that it's risky, but it's doable and it's exciting.
So if I've never been in a position to bet on myself, right, because of our parents might have played it safe, you know, security. Hey, you know what? We're already living paycheck to paycheck. You know, not sure about where food might be coming from. Whatever the situations might keep us in a certain box to play it safe, to ensure that, hey, we can still live from day to day. And so in that, we don't bet on ourselves to take the next step up in a job, ultimately, right? Let alone to jump out cold into entrepreneurism, right? So how do I bet on myself if I've never seen that in my life?
Yes, well, first of all, you don't have to jump out cold, but that's answering a question you didn't ask. But I think what holds most people back, and in fact, it's the first key in my book, is FUD. I call it FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And FUD is larger than life if you're thinking about stepping out on your own. And I always imagine it, I call it the FUD monster because I imagine this little creature that sits on my shoulder and nibbles all this nonsense in my ear,
Hmm.
all the things that you just mentioned, Maurice. Who are you to walk away from a full-time job?
Right.
But you get health insurance through this job. How are you going to do that on your own? And you don't know anything about doing sales or marketing or negotiating your rate or setting your rate or don't reading contracts.
Right. Right.
You must be crazy. So that FUD monster
Hmm.
is what holds people back. And there are ways to tame that FUD monster and and shrink it and minimize it. But I'll tell you, I've been self-employed 20 years and never fully goes away. The FUD monster
Hmm.
still rises up his ugly little head and chews at my self-confidence. But if you know that you're smart enough to figure out what you don't know,
Hmm.
you can probably be successfully self-employed. It's about having the grit and the determination and knowing that you can figure it out and knowing how to get the answers or the
So
help you need.
sometimes, we've been taught, especially for myself being a young entrepreneur. I mean, I've been doing it for over 12 years now. But when I first started out, people were saying, Maurice, you need to be confident and, fake it to make it mentality, right? So sometimes we don't humble ourselves enough to say, you know what, I really don't know. Because we're scared of losing a client, losing a partnership, or whatever it is. So how do we enable ourselves to overcome something simple as that? Because we've been told to show this harsh exterior and that we know everything and that we're totally the expert. But to say I don't know, you come off the expert level a little bit, appearance wise.
Yes. Well, you don't need to tell your client. You don't need to show your prospective clients that you
Hmm.
have fear, uncertainty, or doubt. That's where you find your people. You
Hmm.
find your support group. You find, like I run an educational organization called PICA, the Professional Independent Consultants of America, and a lot of that is just having the community to talk to each other, to talk to other solopreneurs, to come to my office hours and say, Liz, I'm having doubts. Maybe I'm not doing the right things. I'm just feel like I'm not getting anywhere.
Hmm.
So you need to find your people where you can have that vulnerability and say, I need help. I don't know the answers. I'm stuck. I have fear, uncertainty, or doubt, and not necessarily present that to your prospective clients.
Hmm. So you mean to tell me there's more than someone else like me, like that doesn't know the situation, don't have an answer? Like there's other people like me, Liz? Really?
Everybody is like that, Maurice. Every entrepreneur, solopreneur, every wannabepreneur, we all have it. And the thing is, a lot of people will say, "Well, I ran the idea by my spouse, and they really hate the idea." Well, because they want to protect you.
Hmm.
They're there to make sure you don't make a mistake, and parents especially.
Right.
Why would you leave a full-time job and try this very risky thing? They're trying to protect you, and
Hmm.
they're they think they're doing the right thing, and from their perspective maybe they are. That's why your parents or your spouse might not be your people
Hmm.
when it comes to stepping out on your own. Talk to some other people who are self-employed and get their take on it. Would you do it again? What have you struggled with? I encourage people to have at least 3 conversations with somebody that they know, like, and respect,
Hmm.
whether they're self-employed or maybe even somebody they've worked with, and say, hey, I've been playing with this idea for a while of stepping out on my own. What's your experience been like? Or if they're not self-employed, what do you think of that idea?
Hmm.
What do you think my key skills are? In what situations would you hire an external person, a non-employee, to handle different parts of the business?
Hmm.
And just have some conversations, because we spend a lot of our time in our own heads,
Right.
which it might be quite delightful, but it's not helpful always.
So you talking about joining a community. So what have you seen from 20 years ago to now, as far as the community and people actually wanting to help each other out and not just want to say, hey, you are my competition. I'm hoarding all my information. Have you seen a
Yes.
change?
Oh, yes, a humongous change. So, yes. So, one of my favorite terms is coopetition.
Mm.
So, a lot of times and this is a little bit counterintuitive, but what do I mean by co-opetition? So let's say that there are, um, a, I'm thinking about like the members that belong to my educational organization, PICA.
Okay.
So let's say there's 4 women in there, well, 4 people, not necessarily women,
hmm
who specialize in, let's say, leadership development.
Okay.
And what I encourage them to do is to get to know each other, and there's particular flavors of leadership development. Maybe some do it for Fortune 500, some
hmm
do it for startups, some do it for, uh, bilingual teams, who knows?
Right.
But often what happens is when somebody is successful, so let's take, I'm going to make up a name,
hmm
Sue,
hmm
and a client comes to Sue and says, Sue, gosh, we really need you to help us with ABC. And she's like, man, I can't take on another thing right now, but let me introduce you to Maurice.
hmm
He is just as good as I am, maybe even better. And that's where the co-opetition comes in.
hmm
So technically you are a competitor, but when you can refer work back and forth among each other,
Right.
it lifts all boats. So yes, that has changed a lot in the last 20 years. Also 20 years ago, organizations like PICA didn't exist.
hmm hmm
No, there was like your local chamber of commerce, which was
Right.
not helpful.
And,
So
and,
yes,
and
things
so,
have changed.
and it's funny when you said a group, right? You said women first, right? And I'm going to piggyback off of that a little bit because sometimes, even from guys' perspective too, sometimes we don't want to help out each other that's in a particular group, right? We lack for a better term, we hate on each other. Lack for a better term, that's the first thing that comes to my mind.
Well, yeah,
Um,
it's a scarcity mindset, and
right.
there's tons of work out there. No matter what it is that you do, there's business is happening. There's a lot
hmm
of work out there. So a lot of people are more structured about it, or more
hmm
cautious about the referrals. Well, they'll say, you know, well, first you have to develop a relationship where you can even have a candid conversation about this. So networking is super important.
Right.
But let's say, Maurice, you and I were in the same field,
hmm
and I was more cautious about just sharing my clients with you. I'd say,
hmm
I have a referral program in place,
hmm
because oftentimes the clients come to me and I don't have, I can't
Do
serve them
everything.
all.
hmm
And so, would you be interested in learning more about this referral program? And then you have a 1-page document that explains the terms, and you get something in writing,
hmm
and that makes it a little less risky that you're sharing your client base with somebody. And one of the things on that term sheet would say, you've been introduced to this client as a result of my networking and my business, and you will not
hmm
bill directly with this client in the future. So you
hmm
put in a little bit of guardrails there.
Right.
So for people who are a little bit more skeptical of co-opetition,
hmm
that's a workaround.
See, and that's the part that I think um, people don't understand because, again, from educational perspective, we don't know all the forms, we don't know all the legal verbiage and all those type of things. We don't always have that readily available, and or we don't know what to call it. Some people might just say up front, it's just an NDA. Well, that might not just be it. There's a little bit more to that, and so that's something I know I had to learn over a period of time because 12 years ago, even for myself, it wasn't that many groups, and I didn't know that many people that were in the position that I was in either.
Mm-hmm.
And so how do we find those type of groups? Like you said, beyond the like the SBA.gov or the Chamber of Commerce, should I look on Facebook? Should I look on Instagram? Where should I start looking for these groups?
Well, you could start by going to independentconsulting.org, which happens to be my organization, not .com, but independentconsulting.org. But there are also like associations and
hmm
groups throughout the country. For example, my organization, PICA, we partner with the Society of Professional Consultants,
hmm
SPC, which is up in the Northeast.
hmm
And uh, they're they do almost everything virtually now. So it doesn't
hmm
matter that SPC is up in the Northeast.
hmm
But a simple Google search of, you know, uh, more and more of these organizations and associations are virtual.
So now I've gone through, I've taken the leap, right? I decided that I'm going to start the transition from my corporate America job into now entrepreneurship. What should I really, or what type of questions should I start to ask as I've made the decision, I flipped the switch, but now what questions should I start asking now that I'm trying to journey into that space?
The hardest part for people that are looking to make the leap from corporate America or who have made it and are struggling
Mm-hmm.
is clearly defining your niche and how you go to market.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a little counterintuitive, Maurice. A lot of people think that they need to be a jack of all trades or a Jill of all skills so that they're available for more types of work.
Mm-hmm.
However, the reverse is true. The more you have a clearly defined niche that you do ABC for a particular group of people, the more likely you'll get referrals and win more work because you'll be seen as an expert. So if you put yourself in your prospective client's point of shoes and see things from their point of view, they don't want to hire somebody who...
You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. With Indeed sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates, so you can reach the people you want faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Don't wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/PODKATZ13. Just go to Indeed.com/PODKATZ13 right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.
maybe can do it or has possibly done it before, or has maybe done it
Right.
1 or 2 times before, whatever it is, they want to hire an expert, particularly if it's consulting work,
Mm-hmm.
because they're going to be spending tens of thousands of dollars.
Mm-hmm.
So they want to hire the person who does this in this type of industry or for this type of company. And so that's what a lot of people struggle with, is how to clearly define your niche and go to market in a way that you're not diluting your brand, your personal brand or your business brand. So that's a common mistake. And those questions to ask, because you asked me which questions do you ask,
Mm-hmm.
they're in my book, which we haven't talked about. I have a book called Succeeding as a Solopreneur.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a couple of chapters on helping people define their niche and clearly come up with what I call a clear tagline.
Mm-hmm.
So what are the key words that you want people to associate with you and what you do? And that's your tagline. So for example, when I was in consulting, I run 2 businesses now, so I don't necessarily do consulting myself anymore. But when I did, I did organizational change strategy and plans and implementation for big, hairy tech projects, like implementing SAP or Oracle or large global systems implementations.
Mm-hmm.
My keywords were big, hairy change. When somebody was in a steering committee meeting or a staff meeting or an IT meeting, and somebody says, "Oh yeah, we're going to implement PeopleSoft or SAP or Siebel CRM or whatever, and this is going to be a big, hairy change for our Salesforce or for whoever," whenever they would hear the words "big, hairy change," well, one friend in particular, a client, she'd say, wait a minute. If you're doing anything that involves a big, hairy change, you need to have at least one conversation with Liz Steblay, because she's the expert when it comes to making sure that it goes as smoothly as possible. And people would say, well, who's this Liz person? And why do we need to have a conversation with her? And Sally would say, just trust me, you need to have at least one conversation with Liz Steblay. So knowing what your keywords are generates referrals and repeat business. So that's why knowing a niche is so important.
And I think there's something else that you mentioned too, that comes back, because in all reality, what that lady is saying to you as well, there's sometimes we don't pay attention to, is your feedback loop, right? That's relatively your feedback of saying, hey, she's calm, she's cool, she's collected. She's going to make sure that the job gets done. And sometimes we don't pay attention to that. We think that a brand, right, is really the marketing aspect or the advertising aspect and not necessarily what people are saying about us outside of that.
Yes, no, your reputation is more important than any social media posting, any advertising, any white papers. Your personal reputation is really what's super important.
And then there's another part you mentioned too, because everything you said, I'm like, all right, Liz, I'm trying to find a way to break this down. But there is something that you said about having a client and understanding your value financially, because you said tens of thousands possibly with this particular client, right? But a lot of times we don't think that what we are providing is worth that much. So we undervalue what it is. So I know for myself, I only can speak for myself. I started off helping out nonprofit organizations, and I started doing flyers and logos, right? Now, mind you, I went to school. Again, I went to school for it, right? And so now I am in a position where I'm doing this, and I'm only charging $50 a flyer, which was grossly undervalued.
Yes.
Grossly undervalued. And so how do you
15 years ago.
Right. And so how do we understand what our true value is when we don't have that example always in front of us, or we feel as though we need to be 30 years in order to get that $3,000-$4,000, logo or flyer or whatever it is?
Yes. So that's actually the fifth key of the 6 keys to success in my book, and that's to be confident and charge what you're worth. I'd say that's another big mistake I see a lot of solopreneurs make is they undercharge because they want to get their foot in the door, or they discount their rate because they just want to get started with a client. Well, once you go in with a client at a discounted rate, it's exceptionally difficult to raise your rate after that. So I think I have 2 or 3 chapters about how do you figure out what a good rate is? How do you benchmark your rate? How do you quote your rate with confidence? How do you know it's reasonable? And some tricks for quoting a rate. So I'll share one with you right now. So this would be particularly for consultants, but I'd be in a client meeting and I'd be asking all kinds of questions about their situation and where they're at. And, I call those intake meetings. And they'd say, gosh, you sound like you might be just the person that we need. What's your rate? How much do you charge? Tip number 1 is you don't quote a rate in the meeting. Because you need time to think about what's their industry, what's their price sensitivity, what are their other options, what's their sense of urgency. All these things are in my book, by the way. And but sometimes they'll press you. Don't quote one rate, quote a range. I used to say, okay, fine, I'm going to put together a proposal for you, which will detail how I'm going to approach this over the next 3 weeks and what that cost might work out to. But ballpark, my rate ranges from $175 to $225 an hour based on the scope, duration, and complexity of the work. Based on the scope, duration, and complexity of the work. By quoting a range, when you put together your proposal and you pick a number in the middle, it's going to seem fair to them. This is based on the psychological principle called the center stage effect. When people are given a range, they gravitate towards the middle. Never once in 15 years did any client try to push me down to 175 to the low end. Not once. So quote a range, make sure the number that's in the middle is what you'd be happy to get.
Right.
And then put together the proposal. And then don't just send a proposal without first having booked the follow-up meeting. Because that happens a lot. People will send over the proposal and then no reply. So you make sure that you say, okay, well, I can get you a proposal by the day after tomorrow, but let's set up a call for Friday for 30 minutes where we can walk through this proposal so I can make sure that it's tailored to what you had in mind.
Wow. Liz, I'm going to tell you, there's so much information you've given today. You and I can talk about this for a couple more hours. But, I appreciate you coming on. And because you have given us, 3 points out of your book, can you please share with us where they could find this book, right? And so they can learn for themselves what else you have to offer for whatever industry they're looking for.
Yeah, my book is full of practical advice, whether you're a financial planner, or executive coach, an independent consultant, whatever it is that you want to do, there's tips in there for you. And it's not just for people just starting out either. I have veterans who've given me testimonials. They've been at it for 5-10 years. They're like, wow, I picked up some really useful tips in this book.
Nice.
So to answer your question directly, the landing page for the book, which is the easiest way to find it, is to go to 6keys.info.
Okay.
Not .com, because that was too expensive.
I understand that.
6keys.info. Now that can be the number 6, or you can spell out the word 6, but whatever, 6keys.info. Because my last name is hard to spell. Succeeding as a solopreneur is hard to spell. So just go to 6keys.info. From there, you can go to Amazon or bookshop.org or buy a signed copy from me or whatever. It's also available as an audiobook, an ebook, etc.
Nice. So here's what I'm going to do for everyone that's listening. I'm going to add of course, as y'all all well know, the links will be in the bio. I mean, in the show notes. So we will make sure that 6keys.info will be in the show notes, and we will also make sure that the link to the book is in there as well. So that way you don't have to go hunting and pecking. One click and you're right there at the book. So
Thank you.
No problem, Liz. No problem. But
half the time I spell solopreneurship wrong. So yes, it is hard to spell.
And that's fine. But I thank you very much for coming on. But I do have one more question, Liz. And I ask everybody this question. It's my would you rather question. And it's no parameters. Use your imagination. However you like to answer, you can answer it. But would you rather choose 3 doors or a fork in the road?
Wow. Well,
the chuckle.
I'm chuckling because if there's 3 doors, the center stage effects, that would indicate that I would choose the middle door. But if you knew that I was going to choose the middle door, then you would put the biggest prize in the first door, the third door. So I'm going to go with the fork in the road.
Okay. And so, that because I said there's no parameters, use your imagination. All the doors could have been glass, and you could have seen what was behind the doors.
Oh, you're a good point. So I'm not the most imaginative person. I felt a little bit like that scene in The Princess Bride, though, where they're having the battle of wits.
But see, and I think that's some of the things that, sometimes we get caught up, not sure which way to go and all that type of stuff. But I'm going to be honest with you. When I first started asking the question, I didn't think about having the doors as glass. But there was this one guest that said the doors were going to be either glass or acrylic. And there was another guest that said, well, all the doors are already open. You told me to use my imagination, so now I really don't have to guess.
Okay. There you go.
But I thank you very much for coming on to the show, though.
My real sincere pleasure, Maurice. If I've encouraged anybody to consider taking the leap and to go for it, then my job here is done.
Oh, most definitely. If any of you have not picked up the little graham cracker, crumbs that she's left, the little trail.
And Maurice, my parting comment is just because it's called self-employment or solopreneurship, you don't have to do it alone.
Right.
There are lots of people out there to help and support now than there were 20 years ago. I.e.,
your organization, Pika.
Yes, and I do mentoring. In fact, I do free 15-minute mentoring sessions several times a month.
Nice.
Which you can find on my LinkedIn bio. So, no, I love helping people because to me it was the greatest thing. As a single mom, I can't imagine having to juggle my life with a 9-to-5 job.
Oh yeah, it's not like you said. It's not the same.
No,
nowhere near, nowhere near. But I thank you very much for coming on, and of course, everyone, thank you very much for listening to That Will Nevr Work podcast. All the information will be in the show notes, and I will talk to you just a little bit later.
Thanks for listening. Follow Maurice Chism on social media to stay connected and check back weekly for new episodes. Until next time, that will never work. Or will it?